Welcome everybody to our third Quaker Libertarian conversation. I'm excited to be here with Jared Warner. We'll do some introductions in a moment, but first we're going to take a moment to center down. All right, this is what we can only refer to as speed centering. This isn't an hour-long Quaker open worship, but hopefully it's enough to help us get settled for our conversation today. With me today, so I'm Matt Hisrick, founder of Quaker Libertarians and a member of Richmond First Friends in Richmond, Indiana, which is part of the New Association of Friends, which is part of Friends United Meeting. And Jared Warner is with me today. I'm very excited to have him part of the conversation. He is new to the videos, but certainly not new to Quaker Libertarians. Jared, where are you calling in from?
Hi, Matt. I'm Jared Warner, and I am from originally from Mount Air Friends Church in Alton, Kansas, and I'm currently a pastor in the Evangelical Friends Church, Willow Creek Friends Church in Kansas City, Missouri, and we're part of the Mid-America Yearly Meeting, which is part of Evangelical Friends Church, North America. So been Quaker all my life, and we're just the evangelical branch of the Quaker family.
Fantastic. And Juliet Nail, who has been with us in the first couple of videos as part of the Friends General Conference and end of the Friends Spectrum. And of course, we want to be able to hear all the voices that Friends have to weigh in on these topics. But unfortunately, she's traveling. Won't be able to join us. So this was our topic today is Jesus a Republican or a Democrat? And I say that's the topic with some facetiousness because you're obviously, if you're watching this video, it's a Quaker Libertarian channel, and probably we're not going to say that Jesus is a Republican or Democrat. But what's the thought process behind that? Why are people asking this question? And where do we fall? I thought it could be good fodder for conversation. Jared, you're a pastor. Is this the kind of question your congregants come to you with? Is this the kind of thing you hear in the air? What are some initial thoughts on the topic?
Well, my congregants don't necessarily ask the question. They assume that Jesus is exactly like them. So whatever they are, that's what Jesus is.
Yeah.
But when I'm in the community, I'm a bivocational pastor, so I have a job outside of the church as well as being a pastor in a church. When I'm out at my other job site, that question comes up a little bit. Maybe not directly in that question, but a lot of issues they ask, what would is Jesus for this or against that? So in a roundabout way, a lot of the questions that Republicans and Democrats discuss gets brought into where is Jesus in that? So I can answer some of those questions. I have to answer some of those questions, and some of them I refuse to answer because I don't know if Jesus really has an opinion on that. So I don't necessarily think Jesus would have an opinion on some of the things that we discuss. So as Americans, so that's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on something important, which is we all bring biases to anytime we think about theological concepts and Jesus the divine, all these things that we argue and debate about. And one of those is they're essentially just a reflection of me and what I hold, my values, that kind of thing. So if you are a Democrat, of course, Jesus is going to reflect your values, and if you're a Republican, of course, likewise. And one of the traps we could fall into is, well, obviously Jesus was libertarian, right? Which
Absolutely.
in many ways is just nonsense, right? Because the political categories we hold to in 21st century United States would not have any direct alignment to the kinds of things that Jesus was addressing on the ground during his lifetime. That doesn't mean that there is no sense in which Jesus was political, or that if you have an understanding of Jesus as continuing to influence the world and continuing to inform our understandings of how we engage the world right now, there is a way in which Jesus is weighing in, but it may not be aligning with a particular political party, right?
Yeah, I think yes, there's aspects of I mean, Jesus, from my understanding of who he is, fully human, fully God. That's so yeah, what I'm dealing with, he understands because he understands the human condition. So I think that's if we're human, he understands, relationships with other humans. And so because we're dealing with humanity, and that's what politics is kind of dealing with, is how are we working together to do things, or however you want to look at that. So yeah, Jesus does speak to human condition because he lived with us. And that's so yeah, we can see some of what he taught, some of what his followers spoke about, and the arguments that they had. We can see some similarities and learn from those, and hopefully we learn from those. But we also can bring a whole lot of what we're dealing with and assume that that's what it is, and we can kind of cherry pick Bible verses out to make it sound as if all of the Christian history is supporting our agenda, and that's not necessarily true. So, but yeah, I think as far as just human interaction and relationship, Jesus has a lot to speak about on that. But and so does the church, and so does the meetings, and any group of people we're relating to each other. So that's what I believe the church is just us relating to each other and encouraging each other to be the best that we can be.
Yeah, it seems like this is there are some challenging questions here, right? Because on the one hand, this isn't as popular as it used to be, but like the "What would Jesus do" T-shirts and bracelets and that kind of thing. At its best, it's calling us to pause for a moment before we just act on our instincts, and say, okay, let me reflect a moment on how Jesus would respond in this context, right? At its worst, that just becomes throwing my projections of what I think ought to happen in any given context, and sort of putting the label, well, Jesus endorses my actions. In a political sphere, you can say, well, how do I inform my engagement with politics with an understanding rooted in my faith experience, and my understanding of how God and Jesus and humanity interact. At your worst, you say, well, I know that Jesus would vote this way on this bill or for this candidate, and that's it. Things get escalate pretty quickly in that that kind of context, especially if you have two people who disagree about what Jesus would do on any particular election season.
Yeah, and I'm a friend's pastor in Missouri, and that's a show me state. So by definition, every conversation I will have, there's going to be a disagreement. So because it's about an even split on those in my church, surprisingly. So it's there's a lot of discussion that can happen, and you can't just say, well, yeah, Jesus would vote this way. I don't know if Jesus knew how to vote. I don't know. I don't think he is registered to vote. If I you know, he may support mail-in ballots. I don't know, but right now I think the Bible had an emperor, so I don't think he got a vote. So, but and sometimes we don't realize that there was a different political system entirely, and we're looking at a lot of things from our cultural context that uh, may not translate 100% into how we can actually approach our thought process in politics. So
Yeah, and you can spin this a couple of ways. So this we're in a democracy now, and Jesus was operating in a time of, as you said, in the Roman Empire, right? Um, One would be, if we think of kind of the ends of the spectrum, uh, well, Jesus was operating an empire. He didn't have the opportunity to engage the way we do in a democratic environment. And so it's our sort of moral obligation to get out and vote and let our opinions be known, because it's part of what the sort of gifts we've been given in. You can go as far as saying, a God-blessed government system, and sort of on the other end is, well, and certainly there are friends who have taken this position, and libertarians who do say, well, yes, but by voting in a democratic system, you're essentially participating in an oppressive system that is coercive by its nature, by the nature of the state, because anything the government is going to do comes with a gun at the end of it, or the threat of, you're going to jail if you don't follow the rules, that kind of thing. And that's a pretty big swing. You're kind of morally obligated one way or the other to vote or not vote, or vote a particular way.
yeah, and that's part of the problem is we as a culture can spin things, and we can make it sound as if yeah, this is the most important thing ever, and you're totally outside of faith traditions if you don't participate. And and I do strongly encourage people to participate, because there are consequences to opposing certain aspects of government, and if we don't encourage people to maybe reconsider what those consequences are, then we could be sending a lot of people, or threatening a lot of people into doing things one way or another, without actually letting them have their own space and own being able to come up with their own decision and what's best for them. And that's why I struggle with what party I am more aligned with, because sometimes I am very liberty minded, and at other times, yeah, I really wish people would do it my way. But then I have to stop and think, but do I really care about it enough to actually force somebody to agree with me? And the only way that you can really force is either financial obligation, that you're forcing them to pay a fine if they disagree with you, or you're sending them to jail, or even the worst case scenario, going to war and taking life because of a disagreement in how we should approach life in government. So yeah, it's I don't like the idea that I think we should take as much force out as possible and let people make their own decisions.
Yeah, and honestly, this is an area where I vacillate from day to day, really, on where I find myself, and so I haven't taken a hard stance one way or the other. And if you look at the Quaker Libertarians blog or whatever, you'll see posts about why it's important to vote for liberty and vote for less coercion, and also why voting is problematic, right? And because I think this is a live conversation, and ideally there's still, as you're saying, there's space to have that conversation. I I guess part of the libertarian and really the Quaker part of me bristles at the level of organization necessary for political parties to function. And so I find myself one day being supportive of the Libertarian Party, and the next day feeling like, well, you know, I don't, I don't agree with everything they do, or you know, I don't want to get caught up in sort of candidate worship and the kind of stuff that we see across the political spectrum. And so I find myself sort of existing in this cloud of unknowing. Just you know, I want to leave space for the breadth of the approaches on the sort of libertarian end and the Quaker end of how we engage with politics.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. There is a cloud of unknowing. How are we going to know exactly what we should or shouldn't do as a culture, as a community? And, you know, that's why I gravitate towards more libertarian ideas, is because the more intimate the group is, they know what's best for them. And I don't think in a country of, you know, 300 million people plus, there's always going to be areas that we don't have knowledge of. You know, I don't know how to handle traffic congestion in New York because I'm from Kansas City, Missouri.
Right.
We can't figure out traffic in Kansas City, Missouri. So how can I figure it out in New York? So why am I voicing that? And why would I want the farmers at my hometown, what would they know about how to handle things, you know, in coal mining towns of West Virginia or something like that, when they know agriculture? And the same goes for the people that I am with around Kansas City. Some of them have never been to a farm, so they don't know anything about what goes on a farm. And how can we think that, you know, somebody in one place can understand everything that goes into a culture as complex as the United States?
All right,
And
now you're just throwing out big philosophical concepts left and right. And I'm want to just pause here because we could spend whole videos, conversations on each of these really. One is
absolutely.
we have a couple of posts around the topic of sort of how you frame ethics, and particularly in an election season. There's this idea of you make your ethical decisions based on the consequences they're going to have, or you make your ethical decisions based on kind of what's right, in regardless of what's going to happen, right? And in election season, it tends to sway way toward the consequentialist view, which like predicting this and this and this and this are all going to happen if candidate X gets elected or doesn't get elected, and that's why you need to vote this way or that way. And as you're pointing out, you can't predict all the future. You don't know. So to lay that on somebody and sort of make them make a moral decision based on what will inevitably happen is challenge number one. And then the other thing you're raising, which is a whole other area of conversation, is this really emerging out of Catholic social thought, this subsidiarity that the smallest local area of control ought to be who is making decisions in those areas, as opposed to us centralizing force, which is of course the way that national politics in the United States and the federal government works to tend to centralize things, because in one way it's very easy to say, I'm going to pass this bill and it's going to solve this problem, or implement this initiative, and we're doing this nationwide. But the complexities of a country the size of the United States, yeah, it doesn't make any sense for Richmond, Indiana, the way what contextually makes sense in Kansas City, Missouri, what makes sense in Washington, D.C., and how do you have the knowledge of all the various factors that go into any particular context, which, you know, we can get into Hayek and all kinds of things there. I just can't keep up with you is what I'm
Yes.
saying, Jared.
Well, yeah, I can't keep up with myself is the problem. So, but yeah, there's just so much. And so when we think about, well, where's Jesus in all of this? Is Jesus a Republican? Is Jesus a Democrat? The answer, of course, is yes and no, because yes, there's aspects that he might support
Hmm.
according to what we understand of who he is in Scripture, and then there's other aspects where we could say no, he is nowhere near that, and it just depends on what the issue is, and what the time of day is, and what the barometric pressure is. You know, there's so many factors involved. So I don't think there is one way or to say this is exactly what Jesus would believe.
Okay.
So
Pastor Warner, I'm new to your congregation, and you know, elections coming up, and I just want to know what should I do? I want to be a good Christian, good Quaker. Help me out.
how long do you have? It's the elections when? Because that's a conversation that might take 30 years. So um, the advice that I give is what's most important to you,
Hmm.
and what is really the most, what gets you going, what are the concerns that you are really looking into. And then I would ask a question or a query: is this something that you're called to do personally, or is this something that is greater?
Hmm.
Because you know, it may be that what is really getting you worked up is the spirit trying to tell you that, hey, I've shown you that this is an issue, I want you to get active. And are we responding to that that's within us to help our community out? Are we responding correctly if we just say maybe government should take care of this? Or is it something that, you know, I need to step up and talk to the homeless people in my community instead of just saying, let's vote for a homeless shelter to be built?
Hmm.
Uh, so that's kind of where I start is, let's talk about you first, and let's talk about our community. Is this really something that is beyond us, or is it something that we should work together through? Um, and I don't know if I've had this particular conversation with anybody. So if you were to come to my church, Matt, I might just say there's other churches. I, so, but but yeah, I think why is this bothering us, or in a certain situation, why is this bothering us? Is it because of my own thought process in it, or is it maybe something beyond me urging me to participate in a greater deal, in a greater way? Or is it really something that we need to get encourage the larger community to look into? And what is the best and most ethical and, you know, most unifying way of handling some of these situations and problems that we're looking at?
Yeah,
um,
I love everything you're saying. That was I
so
put you on the spot, and that was well handled, and it strikes me as very a very Quakerly response to say, uh, how is the Spirit moving in you, and what are you called to do? And the reality is, like, the world is full of infinite problems, right? And you are not going to be able to solve them all, but you may be able to have an impact uh, in in a number of areas, right?
yeah.
But so you have to do that discernment individually and ideally in a congregational setting, right? Corporately. about what it is you're led to address. And you know, that's a piece of it, is just sort of figuring out what it is you're called to do, but also that piece of, to what extent can your actions reduce violence and coercion in the world. And in my mind, that's very consistent with what Jesus was trying to do, right? So can Jesus inform your actions in the political sphere? Yes. Does it mean that you have to sort of outline a whole utopia of everything that's going to happen once everything gets implemented? No, but maybe what can you do today? What can you do tomorrow, next week? That kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah. Just a case in point, in Kansas City, and it's not anything that Quakers have done or friends or anybody in particular, but there is a group of people that was concerned with homelessness among the veterans that live in the area. And in Kansas City, somebody saw that and was irritated that there were so many veterans living on the street, so they decided to build a community of tiny houses for the veterans. So it's I don't remember exactly what it is. Home for Vets, I think, is what it is. And they were able to convince the local governments to give them a plot of land for next to nothing, like a penny, I believe, is how much they sold it for. And they just started building little one-room apartment type things and allowed for 3 months anyone that qualifies to live in those apartments would be able to live and try to get back on their feet again.
Oh.
So it wasn't necessarily a giant political campaign. They had an issue that they saw was a problem, and they knew how to build these tiny homes and decided that that's how they're going to spend their time. And it's been, as far as I know, very successful. So, and I don't have a link to it, but you can look it up on the internet and see how it's been done. And it's it just is one of those examples where, yeah, if you see a problem, the first thing that we do isn't necessarily let's get a great big government program going on it, but how can I help with what I have available to me? So, and I love the idea that they did, because it was very good. So, and very successful. I don't know how many people they house, but they house quite a few now.
That's awesome. And Juliet has been trying to get me to end on a positive note, and so we can we can say that, look, you can do something. And the advantage of posting these videos is I can include links to information in the description. So well, we could, I'm sure, talk about this for quite a while, but I don't want to overstay our welcome on YouTube here, and also leave some conversation material for future episodes. Thank you very much, Jared, for joining us. And
no problem.
Video. Yeah, and so congratulations, Jared's son was married this weekend, and that's why he's dressed up today.
Yeah, I don't usually wear ties to once about 1 o'clock. Usually the ties come off. So today it lasted a little longer because we didn't get away from the church until later. So we had quite the experience this weekend. It was great.
Well, congratulations again. We'll let you get back to your family.
All right, thank you.
Sure.